Hello, friend. My name is Ollie, and today I'd like to talk about living in guilt. What that means, how it happens, why it's bad, and how to grow past it. Um, Today, I think, is going to be a relatively lengthy video. I'm hoping it's quite robust. So, of course, this discussion stems from my own personal perspective and experiences. It's not like I'm a doctor or anything like that. No certifications. Just really hoping that by sharing my insight, hopefully somebody can get some use out of it. So I'd like to share a fun little saying that I put together last year in 2018. Guilt is like coffee. So bear with me here. You know how some people, a lot of people, they drink coffee to jumpstart their awareness in the morning, give them an energy boost. Maybe not just in the morning, maybe sometime through the day, um, for the caffeine. And some people, they live on coffee, right? They run on coffee. Maybe you do. Maybe you know somebody else who does. Um, they drink lots of coffee throughout the day. I had a friend the other day in the middle of work. He was like, "Man, there's not enough caffeine in the world right now," you know. Um, but some people drink more than is healthy, and guilt, I think, in my mind at least, is a lot like that. Um, Guilt should be used as a tool to jumpstart your behavior into a healthier direction, right? When your behavior suffers, when it's not quite what it should be or what you want it to be. But some people, they have a really unhealthy relationship with guilt, and they end up living in guilt. They run on guilt, they have guilt all the time, and that really defines a lot of their actions and attitude. And eventually, I think they even become addicted to guilt. So, guilt is a pretty normal thing for people to experience when they do something that they wish they didn't, particularly if that something is immoral, right? So, I would describe guilt as a very uncomfortable and often overwhelming feeling, and it oftentimes goes hand in hand with embarrassment, regret, sadness, and hopefully empathy. I know I've found within myself and with so many people that I've met, I find it's very, very common in my experience that guilt leads to very damaging self talk. Self talk is incredibly powerful. We don't always realize how powerful it is, but negative, harmful self talk can be so damaging to us mentally. It's really unhealthy, and that's something I really wanted to cover in this video, so more on that in a bit. But guilt, when properly handled, is incredibly important, useful, and even healthy for us to experience. So, how do you properly handle guilt? It's about acknowledging reality, acknowledging the situation, the actions that were taken, the consequences, what a better action or decision could have been. It's about allowing yourself to feel and be really genuinely in tune with the reality of the situation, especially the negative consequences, the stuff that you end up feeling guilty about. It's about facing reality, and facing reality is not a bad thing. It's not. It's a very healthy, important thing. Now, believe me, this is after many rough experiences, many times where I didn't believe this, but now I am completely convinced that any bad situation can be made better. But here's the thing. How are you supposed to change reality, work with reality, when you don't acknowledge or accept reality, right? So, if you're responsible for the situation, that means feeling guilt. That's what guilt is. You feel bad about it because of this thing that happened. So, you have to allow yourself to be in tune with it so you can accept it. At that point, you can then work with it and make it better. So, guilt is kind of like a cup of coffee. That one cup, you use it to point yourself in a better direction. But it's when you hold on to it and you keep going in that guilt to where you start to get some very unhealthy consequences. Guilt is often a very strong emotion, even overwhelming, and because of that, it can be really easy to process guilt in an unhealthy way. And this often manifests in negative self talk and simply holding on to guilt for long past its use. Processing guilt can be a blurry line. It can feel like a balance between using guilt and feeling it to promote better behavior or letting it bring you down because it feels bad. This blurry line is unfortunately oftentimes perpetuated by bad habits or society, and so it's very common for people to use guilt to bring themselves down into a worse state than before. You might have done this. You've probably seen it either in yourself or somebody else. Somebody does something bad, they regret it, they feel bad about it, they feel guilt, and that guilt puts them into a worse state than before. They have a worse self-image, worse mindset and attitude, and even worse behavior. This creates a cycle that only makes things worse. I've seen this ruin people's relationships. I've seen this make people miserable. Not processing guilt properly was a huge factor in this. And it's sad and ridiculous when you really realize it, because this is, of course, the exact opposite of what guilt is for. A very common thing that I've seen and I've done a lot in my own life is to hold on to guilt for long past its use, way too long. And this becomes a habit. You can hold on to it for years or even decades, or some people even a lifetime. And it becomes a habit or potentially even an addiction to this type of mindset. And that is living in guilt. So what comes from living in guilt? What does it do? Well, of course, exactly how it manifests is different from person to person. But one thing is for sure, you are not in an optimal state. Some very common symptoms I see include lack of confidence, of course, the negative, harmful self-talk, and a big one is making other people feel guilty. I want to talk about that one because it's very common, it's very damaging, and there are some very powerful, important lessons about that I want to convey. So when you see somebody that oftentimes tries to put other people down, they try to paint them in a guilty light, or they try to make them feel guilty, there is actually a really good chance, I find, that this person is living in guilt themselves. So how that works is, if you can't feel forgiven, you then naturally begin to seek that feeling of forgiveness. Of course, the only way to really feel that is to not live in guilt, learn how to properly handle guilt. But if your soul is missing that feeling and you're having a really hard time breaking free from that habitual mindset of guilt, one thing you might do is to put other people down, try to make them feel guilty. Because then you can feel, keyword feel, it's not necessarily reality, but you can feel some sort of temporary redemption, right? You can feel like you're some sort of source of justice. You're responsible for this good thing. But it's not real self-worth. It's fleeting. It's a facade. Because it's not real self-worth. You're simply trying to patch it. It's a temporary patch. If you have an object that is falling apart, right, and it needs to be repaired, it needs to be confronted, Scotch tape will only last so long. Imagine if your soul is like a vessel and you have a leak in your soul, and this leak drains all of your self-worth. So anytime that you receive a compliment or you accomplish something good, that self-worth leaks right out. So I lived that way for a very long time. I've known other people that do. A variation on making other people feel guilty is to compare yourself to others. This is pretty much the same mindset here. So you're like, oh, well, at least I'm not that guy. At least I'm not doing what that guy is doing, right? Well, the thing is, you're not doing this because you care about their performance. You're doing this because you want to feel better yourself, right? And so the thing is that whatever you're blaming them for, oftentimes it's fabricated or exaggerated, right? You see this sort of behavior in people who badmouth other people a lot. There are some people who look at any opportunity to complain about something somebody's doing. I've known people like this. Ultimately, this doesn't actually help anybody. And they might try to say, oh, well, I'm a perfectionist, so I care about that, but that's not really why they're doing it. It's because they don't feel good about themselves. They don't feel forgiven. They feel like they need to make up for it. And ultimately, it only makes things worse, believe me. So, personally, how it affected me was it shrunk my confidence. It limited my willingness and desire to try new things or ask for things. I didn't feel confident or worthy. Even very simple things like picking something at a restaurant. I have actually gotten anxiety attacks at restaurants from trying to pick what's on the menu. It would freak me out. I didn't feel worthy. I don't like asking for things because it makes me feel like I'm selfish or something, because that was what was imprinted on me from early childhood. Negative self-talk was incredibly common for me, and I believed it a lot. To give you an idea, my personal brand of guilt that I've dealt with all throughout, and I stemmed from early childhood, all throughout my teens. My dad was a very authoritarian type of personality, and the message he gave us, me and my siblings, ever since we were born basically was, you have to do this or else you're a bad person. Okay, so of course that led me to feel like a bad person whenever I made a mistake or I didn't understand something or whatever. I mean, I know he meant well, and I realized after the fact that he had a lot of these same emotions too, lack of self-worth, and that's what drove a lot of his decisions. But the truth is the opposite. Personally, the way I see it, after lots of thought, lots of experiences in my so far still young life, admittedly, but I'm completely convinced that everybody is good deep down. It's just the garbage of pain and insecurity that leads us to make poor decisions in our behavior because we don't process this pain, this garbage, these bad events in a healthy way. So I felt hopeless for my future. I believed this garbage for a long time. It was so easy to feel guilty about things and got caught in a cycle of guilt leads to a lack of confidence. Lack of confidence leads to a lack of action. Lack of action makes you feel guilty because you didn't act. I mean, it's crazy, judgment calls, trying to figure out a situation, that's one thing. But choosing your flavor of ice cream, now that is difficult. But anyway, another example is I actually knew somebody who lived in guilt really badly. Lots of self-loathing, negative self-talk, constantly stressed, miserable all the time. And this is not even me saying that. This is something that this person has said about themselves to me. This person was the epitome of the survivor mentality. You can either survive or you can thrive. They're opposite mindsets. This person always sought to take a stance of opposition, like they're always a victim, because this person was a victim in various situations in their life. But if you take a stance of opposition, then you can have a chance to win. And if you can win, you can feel strength and worth. Relationships aren't about winning and losing. I feel like I don't need to say that, but you see where I'm going here. So what this meant in reality was bad talking people and blaming them for things that they didn't do, things they weren't guilty of. Of course, this is extremely toxic. Rather than healing the wounds in the soul from a real, genuine perspective, this person simply sought out opportunities to feel above other people. And it's not because this person felt like they were all that in a bag of chips. It was the exact opposite, because this person felt worthless. So this person sought opportunities to feel worth, but the angle that this person took were unhealthy angles, not real healing. Of course, living in guilt also just makes you feel depressed and unmotivated. It's really difficult to feel passionate and motivated to do something when you feel guilty, right, and depressed. I had things in my life that I was absolutely passionate about, but I didn't feel motivation to do them. I didn't feel confident in my ability. I had no hope in my future, remember? I mean, it's hard to have this attitude of, oh yeah, I'm going to go get this done, right? When deep down you believe that it's worthless and pointless and you're not going to do a good job. That doesn't work. Don't try it, okay? It's just, but if you have something, some goal in your mind that you want to achieve and you're like, oh, that's good. Starting a family, starting a charity, even just donating to charity, creating something, whatever it is, some good goal that you know is good, but you don't feel motivated to actually take the action and do it, please know that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't even necessarily mean that you have your priorities wrong or that you're lazy. It might stem, I'd say it probably stems from a lack of confidence. And this might stem from guilt or lack of self-worth. So how does living in guilt start? Well, you feel guilty about something, whether legitimately or not, and you don't process it properly. And here are a few reasons why that might happen. I have a short list here. Maybe you don't feel forgiven. Maybe it's because somebody in the situation hasn't forgiven you, or you haven't forgiven yourself for whatever reason. Maybe you feel lesser just as a human being for whatever reason. These things, they kind of feed into themselves. Not feeling forgiven, feeling guilt can cause you to feel lesser, but also you might feel this guilt and hold on to it because you feel lesser. Exactly how it manifests is different. Maybe, this is a big one, maybe you stake your self-worth on external factors such as people's opinions or how they treat you. Don't do that. It's a bad move. Remember, this is all from my experiences, and I can tell you firsthand that is a bad move. Boy. Maybe you don't forgive others. Maybe you have a sort of bitter, begrudging attitude. Now, what happens there is that subconsciously, whatever reason you have to not forgive somebody, you will apply that same reasoning to yourself. Ultimately, it's pretty much always a good idea to forgive people, including yourself. And so if you make up these reasons to not forgive somebody, subconsciously, you'll be under that same criteria. So you'll feel pretty bad. I've seen that several times. This next one is kind of vague. Maybe you have a habit of feeling bad. I know that's ambiguous wording. Whatever that habit is, however it formed, whatever that means to you, the bottom line is that breaking free of habits and mindsets can be very, very difficult, very challenging, scary, uncomfortable. Breaking free from the familiar, right? It's difficult. And lastly, one really common one is the belief that by keeping yourself down, beating yourself up, you will then behave better. This really could not be further from the truth. Like, don't get me wrong, there can be a time and place to kind of kick yourself in the pants and be like, okay, well, I gotta get a grip on things, but ultimately this pulls yourself away from your best self, okay? It perpetuates bad decisions. These are all my experiences. I'm 21 years old, and it's only in the past year or so that I've started to really understand a lot of this stuff and really apply it to my life. Here's the thing. Positivity does not come from negativity. You cannot get happy, healthy, positive results from unhappy, unhealthy, negative roots. It doesn't work. You need to have a negative attitude on the negative things in your life. That's sort of double negative, right? Enough to help you realize what's bad, what doesn't work, what's good, what does work. And then you choose positivity. You are deliberately positive and move towards those good things. That is how you get to where you want to be, not beating yourself up all the time. So finally, how to properly handle guilt. So first off, like I mentioned before, there is always, always, always the possibility to make a bad situation better. And there is always, always, always the possibility to grow, for the people involved to grow and learn and have more understanding and better character. So first you want to be conscious and mindful, right? Be conscious of what you allow yourself to think and feel and believe. This is true all the time, but especially during times like guilt, times that are highly sensitive, stressful, and intense. And you want to acknowledge your feelings of guilt. Don't sweep it under the rug. Don't try to hide it or forget it, because it will stay in the back of your mind. It will grow. It will perpetuate the issue, and it will create more issues. It will give you an unhealthy foundation for which your mind to grow. Your mind is always going to grow. So give it a good foundation. Everything that you think about, that's a foundation for future thoughts to happen. Those thoughts shape your reality. So embrace the guilt. And I do not mean wallow in despair. I do not mean exaggerate. I do not mean beat yourself up. Absolutely not. I just got done talking about why that's bad. But embrace the guilt. The reality. No better, no worse. Just be real with yourself. Be real about how you feel and the consequences of this. What actually happened in the situation. Acknowledging reality is the first step to influencing reality, right? Acknowledge how you wish it were different. Let this motivate you into changing your behavior in the future. This is growth, okay? We're already there. That's growth. That's improvement. That's healing. And that's how you can eventually let go of the guilt. So here's another nugget of wisdom for you. By acknowledging that you could have done better, you acknowledge that doing better is a possibility. And if it wasn't, you'd have nothing to feel guilty about. Okay, so I don't know about you, but that was really profound for me. I mean, isn't it wonderful that doing better is a possibility, that there is that room for improvement, there's a way to grow, that there is a better way? That's a great thing. Be happy about that. Stop being so sad, right? I mean, failure is just another means of learning what not to do, right? It's that same basic principle with guilt. While guilt feels ugly and nasty and horrible at first, it is a tool to jumpstart you into a better, brighter future that you can create. That's an amazing thing. First, you acknowledge, and then you embrace, then you accept, then you motivate, then you act. That's how I would outline it. So, of course, another really important step is to actually work on a solution to whatever this problem is, whatever you feel guilty about. Not only is this the right thing to do, but it helps point your mind towards construction, healing, and positivity. You may be responsible for the situation. And working on a solution can help you move past the guilty feelings because you're undoing that situation, you see? So it also shows others involved that you do care, that you felt the guilt, that you care about the situation, you care about the people, you care about the outcome. And this may encourage them to want to forgive you. But what if you're in a situation where you can't work on a solution? What's done is done. So you still have to accept the reality and move on. Sorry. Hate to break it to you, but you have to use it as a learning opportunity and grow. You may not be able to fix it now, but you may be able to prevent this again in the future, but only if you use this lesson now to grow. There's always the ability to learn and grow. Forgiveness is often a big factor in not feeling guilt. Self-forgiveness is incredibly important. It's absolutely key to moving on and not living in guilt. And I know it can be hard to forgive yourself, especially if it could have been prevented, or if you can't fix the situation now, or if somebody else hasn't forgiven you. Even if somebody else hasn't forgiven you, you can't let that stop yourself from forgiving yourself. You still need to confront that on your own. You gotta remember, you are in control of your thoughts, but nobody else's. It doesn't mean you need to convince them to forgive you or be offended or retaliate or anything like that. No, I mean, you have to realize that's where they're at mentally. You offer your apologies, you help where you can, but everybody has a right to their own opinions. I mean, you have your rights. If they act in a way that's unwarranted towards you, you have your rights. But as far as opinions and feelings go, we have to coexist. That's how life is. We're all humans here. We all have our own opinions, and coexistence is how you get through that. And you deal with yourself how you can. So a tip, don't get stuck on it could have been prevented. Lots of things could have been prevented. It's in the past now. What's done is done. You can't change that. Use the knowledge for the present and the future. The future will one day be the present, right? Not the past. Don't use your energy on the past where it won't work. All we have is the present to affect our futures, which will one day be the present. The past is for educational purposes only. So I hope with this video I was able to offer a robust outline of not only how to process guilt, but what happens when you don't. Guilt feels bad, but it can reshape you in such incredible ways and give you so much more good than you could have imagined if you only process it in the right way, if you use guilt for what it's for, right? So remember, treat guilt like coffee. Let it jumpstart you into a better direction. Don't dwell in it and let it bring you down, making it harder for you to do what you feel bad about not doing. And remember that negativity does not bear positivity. You need positivity for positivity. Negativity is used to acknowledge the bad and acknowledge the reality of consequences. So I really hope you got a lot out of this. Thank you so much for listening. If you think this will help somebody, please feel free to share it. Please feel free to share your perspective in the comments. Thank you so much. Much love.